You think you can embarrass me here in front of all these people? My husband's voice cut through the elegant ballroom like a knife. Look around, Celeste. Everyone knows you don't belong here. You're nothing but a pretty face I bought from the ghetto. But then the auction started and they announced the evening's mystery philanthropist had donated $50 million. My name echoed through the speakers. But let me explain how we got here. Because what happened that night at the Crystal Rose Gala changed everything I thought I knew about power, respect, and justice. 3 years ago, I married Richard Wellington, heir to the Wellington pharmaceutical empire. Not because I needed his money, though he assumed that's exactly why. I married him because I genuinely believed we were in love. I was running a small soul food restaurant in Atlanta when we met. He'd wandered in one rainy evening, soaked and frustrated, after his car broke down nearby. I served him my grandmother's famous fried chicken and cornbread, and something magical happened. He said he'd never tasted anything so authentic, so real. For 6 months, Richard courted me like I was a queen. He'd drive across town just to eat at my restaurant, bringing friends and business partners. He told me I had a gift, that my food brought people together in ways his fancy 5-star establishments never could. When he proposed, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. The nightmare began 3 weeks after our wedding. Celeste, darling, you can close that little restaurant now, Richard announced over breakfast. My wife doesn't need to work. It's beneath your station. When I protested, explaining how much the restaurant meant to me, he laughed. Don't be ridiculous. You're a Wellington now. Act like it. But I didn't close it. Instead, I did something Richard never bothered to notice. I quietly expanded while he thought I was playing housewife, attending charity luncheons and shopping. I was building an empire. I opened my second location 6 months after our wedding. Then a third, then 10 more. Within 2 years, Wellington's Soul Kitchen had 47 locations across 12 states. Richard never asked about my days or showed interest in my life beyond our social appearances. His mother, Patricia Wellington, made sure I understood my place from day one. We know what you're after, dear, she'd whisper at family dinners. Richard's money has attracted many gold diggers before you, but we're watching. The psychological warfare was subtle but constant. Richard would introduce me at parties as my beautiful wife from Atlanta, emphasizing the word Atlanta like it was code for something shameful. His friends would ask what I did before Richard saved me, as if my entire existence began the day I married into wealth. The breaking point came 3 months ago during a family dinner. Richard's cousin made a joke about urban cuisine and everyone laughed. When I tried to defend the cultural significance of soul food, Richard put his hand on mine and said, Celeste doesn't understand business talk. She's more comfortable in the kitchen. The entire table chuckled like I was a child who'd spoken out of turn. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my lawyer, the one Richard didn't know. Richard presented me with our prenup. I was young and trusting, but I wasn't stupid. I had my own attorney review every page. What Richard's arrogant lawyer didn't expect was that my attorney was smarter than him, much smarter. The prenup Richard thought protected his fortune actually had a fatal flaw. In his rush to humiliate me with insulting clauses about my modest background and limited earning capacity, his lawyer included language that backfired spectacularly. The document stated that in case of divorce due to irreconcilable differences stemming from differences in social and economic backgrounds, the spouse who maintained dignity despite social pressures would receive 60% of marital assets. Richard's lawyer assumed I'd be the one causing problems, the one unable to handle high society. They never imagined Richard would be the one creating the irreconcilable differences through his treatment of me. But what I discovered next changed everything. During our marriage, I hadn't just been building my restaurant empire. I'd been donating millions to charity under the name Anonymous Benefactor. The Children's Hospital where tonight's gala was being held, I'd already given them $25 million over 2 years. The Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Women Entrepreneurs, another $15 million from me. Richard had no idea his gold-digging wife was worth over $200 million. The Crystal Rose Gala was supposed to be Richard's moment of ultimate humiliation for me. He'd spent weeks dropping hints to his social circle that he had big news to share. His mother had been calling her friends, warning them that changes were coming to the Wellington family. They thought they were about to witness Richard publicly divorcing his unsuitable wife. I knew exactly what Richard planned because his assistant, Maria, had been secretly recording his conversations for months. 5:44 5 minutes, 44 seconds. Maria's daughter needed surgery the hospital couldn't afford. When I anonymously paid for the operation, Maria felt compelled to warn me about Richard's schemes. That's how I learned he intended to announce our divorce at the charity gala in front of 400 of society's elite. I want everyone to see what happens when someone marries above their station. Richard had told his mother on the phone. Celeste needs to learn her lesson publicly. The night of the gala, Richard was practically glowing with anticipation. He'd chosen my dress himself, something conservative and understated that would make me blend into the background while he commanded attention. As we walked into the crystal rose ballroom, I felt the familiar weight of judgmental stares. "Remember, darling," Richard whispered in my ear. Patricia Wellington immediately swooped over with her usual passive-aggressive charm. "Celeste, dear, how lovely you look. So appropriate for the occasion." Her friends circled like vultures, their diamond jewelry glittering as they exchanged meaningful glances. The dinner portion of the evening was excruciating. Richard regaled our table with stories about his business ventures, occasionally patting my hand condescendingly. "Celeste doesn't really understand the pharmaceutical industry," he explained to a potential investor. "She's more of a domestic type." When the auction portion began, Richard's excitement was palpable. This was his moment. He stood up, tapping his champagne glass with his wedding ring until the entire ballroom fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "Tonight, we're here to support the Children's Hospital, an institution close to many of our hearts. But before we begin the auction, I have something personal to share." I felt my heart pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. "Marriage," Richard continued, "is about partnership, about two people who complement each other, who bring equal value to the relationship." His eyes found mine across the table, and I saw the cruel satisfaction there. Unfortunately, not everyone understands this concept. Some people marry for love, others. He paused dramatically. Others marry for financial security. The room was dead silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, waiting for my humiliation. "That's why," Richard said, his voice growing stronger, "I've decided to make some changes in my personal life. Changes that will ensure I'm surrounded only by people who truly value me for who I am, not what I can provide." This was it. The moment he planned to destroy me publicly. But Richard had no idea what was about to happen. The hospital's development director, Dr. Sarah Chen, suddenly approached the podium. "Mr. Wellington, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have an urgent auction update." Richard looked annoyed. This wasn't part of his script. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen announced before we proceed with tonight's auction, "I have incredible news to share. We've received the largest single donation in our hospital's history, $50 million from someone who has been supporting our work anonymously for years." The crowd gasped. Richard's face lit up. He thought this was perfect timing for his grand revelation. "The donor," Dr. Chen continued, "has finally agreed to be recognized tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mrs. Celeste Wellington for her extraordinary generosity." The color drained from Richard's face as if someone had pulled a plug. 400 heads turned to stare at me, but now their expressions were completely different. Shock, admiration, confusion. I stood up slowly, my legs surprisingly steady. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. But I'm not finished yet." I walked to the podium, feeling Richard's stunned gaze boring into my back. When I reached the microphone, I turned to face the crowd and my husband. Richard was right about one thing. I began, my voice clear and strong. Marriage is about partnership, about bringing equal value to the relationship. What he didn't know is that while he's been building his pharmaceutical business, I've been building something, too. I looked directly at Richard, whose mouth was hanging slightly open. Wellington's Soul Kitchen. 47 locations across 12 states, 200 million in annual revenue. I started with one small restaurant and my grandmother's recipes while my husband assumed I was shopping and lunching. I was creating jobs for over 3,000 people. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. I could see Patricia Wellington gripping her pearl necklace so tightly I thought it might break. But Richard, you were also wrong about something. I continued. You said some people marry for money. You're absolutely right. You married me because you thought I needed your money. I married you because I thought you could love me despite having more money than your family ever dreamed of. Dr. Chen stepped forward again. Ladies and gentlemen, what Mrs. Wellington hasn't mentioned is that over the past 2 years, she has donated over $40 million to various charities throughout the city. The new children's wing we're building. It's being named the Celeste Center for Pediatric Excellence. Richard finally found his voice. That's impossible. He stammered loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Celeste, what is this? Some kind of joke. I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with something that might have been pity. The only joke, Richard, is that you spent 3 years married to someone you never bothered to actually know. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. These are divorce papers. I filed them this morning. According to our prenuptial agreement, the one your lawyer was so proud of, I'm entitled to 60% of your assets due to irreconcilable differences stemming from your treatment of our different social and economic backgrounds. Richard's face went from white to red to purple. You can't be serious. My lawyer said, your lawyer made a mistake. I interrupted. A big one. He assumed I'd be the problem in our marriage. He never considered that you'd be the one unable to handle our different backgrounds. Specifically, that I come from a background where people work for their success instead of